Welcome, Bitcoiners. Cloudy day, but the sun is a poot of guest. Bitcoin is running just fine. Got no problems here. Let's have a coffee and talk about what is new. Mm, big news today. Big news. Big news. Big news. Tried a few things on connection audio. Well, let me get this out of the way. That's probably blocking me. So let me know. Let me know if the audio and everything is better today. We're going to keep A/B testing. Again, I remind you, my goal was never to be a sound engineer, but apparently I'm going to have to learn this garbage. But it's getting better. I think I figured it out. Let me know today. Let me know how we're doing today. All right. So, as you know, we like to start each show with a little Moscow time, a little Moscow time. And today we find out that we have, there is such a thing as systemic racism in America, right? I talk about the teachers' unions. I talk about the education system on this show. We are against the racists in the Department of Education and basically how they segregate kids according to race and money and income and neighborhood and zip code and all these other things. Well, the San Diego Union Tribune lets us know that there are three reasons why the effort to end the U.S. Department of Education is indeed racist. Okay. Here, I guess it's anything that reduces the size of the government is inherently racist, right? That's what we're going with. But there is still other pockets of systemic racism, and New York Times found one today. They found it. It's really tough. It is that black equestrians want to be safe, but they can't find the helmets. They can't find the helmets. So this is an actual article in the New York Times today. Black equestrians want to be safe, but they can't find the helmets. Okay. Well, we'll try and figure it out. Hopefully we can find a way to make sure everyone has the right helmet. Right? We want the right helmet on everyone who's interested in getting into horseback riding. Definitely don't want to leave anyone out of horseback riding. It's really important. So, now yesterday I gave a bit of an update, and I want to cover that again today on War Clandestine and A.G. Huff, Dr. A.G. Huff. So it turns out yesterday I said it's the first time I've ever heard War Clandestine called a psyop, and that was from A.G. Huff saying he doesn't buy. So he wrote he wrote a book on the Wuhan virus, the COVID-19 virus, the lab leak part. It has been optioned for a movie. He was on Tucker Carlson recently. So he came out and said, he went out and said that War Clandestine, who's tying the lab leak to Metabiota and everything that went on in Ukraine. So he's saying that it was created in Ukraine and moved to Wuhan and then spread from there. No one is disagreeing that the NIH in America was funding gain of function research. That part everyone agrees on, both War Clandestine and A.G. Huff. What A.G. Huff said was absolutely no way did this have the connection to the Hunter Biden piece. Now, I admitted on the show that narrative bias is there. You kind of want to believe it, right? Why was Trump impeached in January 2020 with all the Zelensky stuff, the perfect phone call, the quid pro quo, and all those things? And then boom, COVID comes out not long after. So I still don't know the answer, but at least I'll say yesterday I thought that A.G. Huff, just because he's been more public and looks more scrutinized, and we don't really know who War Clandestine is in the first place, so who knows? We're just going to have to go on our gut. Well, War Clandestine came out and finally addressed the A.G. Huff stuff and actually even shared a picture of himself talking about this stuff. So I still don't know the answer. I still do not know the answer, but what I will say is fog of war. I'm not sure who to trust in any of these instances, but I'm going to continue to follow both of them, and try not to get involved in what's going on and who's right about this. I don't think we really can, with the proof that's there, go that far. But War Clandestine does bring up the important point that there is a follow the money aspect of what A.G. Huff is doing, which is that he's trying to sell books. And if the if the actual story doesn't fit his narrative, which he's got option for a movie now, then there's a problem. So who knows? Who knows? I just want to mention it. There is a follow the money aspect to this. War Clandestine did address some of the AG Huff complaints and criticisms of him being a psyop guy and not having the proof. So we don't know the answer. I just want to bring up both of these guys. Here's what War Clandestine does say, though. He says that Huff's entire reasoning for calling me a psyop is because he was approached by people who he thinks may be Russian agents, and they are saying the same thing I am. That it wasn't made in Wuhan, that it came from globalists via biolabs in Ukraine. And he says we have evidence of it. So I've read it. It's all just hearsay as far as I can tell. Now, AG Huff just made the argument for me as to why it came from Western globalists via Ukraine. China didn't have the vaccines ready, and their economies were growing. So that was AG Huff's argument here. If China would have let it spread from there, they would have had the drugs, right? And he says, who did have the vaccines ready? Big fucking pharma, pardon the swearing, and their US politician lapdogs. Think AG Huff is arrogantly assuming that China are responsible for the virus when we don't know that. His predetermined outcome is clouding his judgment. Why? Book sales, he says. He has a direct incentive for the attention to be about Wuhan, despite no proof that China made it. I don't think we have proof in any event. We have a lot of lies and a lot of confusion. So fog of war, continue to follow this story. We're going to follow it here, but I don't think there's any way to determine who's lying here. We can continue to follow the money and continue to follow both of them because they do put forward coherent narratives. We'll see which one is more predictive. We'll see which one explains everything. I do want an explanation from metabiota, or whatever it is in Ukraine, and why exactly the impeachment and the virus coming out at the same time happened. What's up with that coincidence, right? We don't know. We're going to keep looking. We're going to keep looking. In other news, we've got more of this nitrogen fertilizer ban protest stuff going on in Europe. Finally, you want to see that. It's spread now from the Netherlands into Belgium. They've crippled the European Parliament today with, and they're doing the shit cannons again, where they rise their shit cannons out and they shoot everyone. That's a pretty good move, right? I think the farmers should really embrace the shit cannon. The shit cannon should be one of the great symbols of the economic and psychological war that is World War III, because it's hard to beat a shit cannon. It's disrespectful in the right way. Those pictures where you see the police just getting pounded with shit cannons. You know what I'd like to see? I'd like to see one day when Greta gets arrested, that instead of a photo op, that they bring the shit cannon in and let her have it, right? I'd be into some shit cannon on Greta. I'm serious about that. I would like to see Greta eat some shit cannon. That would be funny. So another one of these arrestations that she had yesterday, getting arrested. Again, now she's against the wind farms. She's against the wind farms because now it's the reindeers, because the reindeers have to go. So when is this teenage girl, or is she a teenager? I don't know. When is she going to be happy? We don't know, right? But my advice is do not A/B test your policies based on the happiness of young girls. I just don't think it's the right approach, right? You don't want to go down that road. Everyone wants to make sure, I've got a wife, daughters. My whole life is to make them happy, but it's a hard task, right? It's really tough. And I think that's normal. I think that's what drives a lot of men. And so I just don't think, it's good for your house to have that as a policy. I'm not sure if it really should extend to beyond the home, right? I think you should probably pause a little bit there. So that's what's going on over there. Here's a pretty interesting story that I saw today. And both Balaji and Siki Chen at Bladder points it out. So it's about AI. So first of all, Balaji is talking about some people are criticizing or concerned that Facebook's AI is coming out soon. And Balaji says, okay, I definitely think there's a reason to criticize this. But here's what he says, because now, one thing we did talk about on this show is that if AI wasn't in the bag for whoever's creating it, then it would get banned, because the things AI has to actually say about money, for example, you remember the early AI that had some great stuff about Bitcoin, and now that's all getting suppressed and taken away, and it's getting modified, and the language learning models are figuring out a way to be woke and to be really messengers for who created them, right? So the creator of the AI really dictating what's coming out of them. And Balaji puts it into context. He says the consequence of heavy AI regulation is becoming clear. Only giant corporations, bad actors, and the Chinese government get these AI. Everyone else is downstream unless we decentralize, which is the prediction we made here, right? We made a prediction here a long time ago that AI, if it was decentralized, if it ends up even created by a commercial interest to sell to an individual, in the same way that the AI is motivated by the people who are teaching it today, right? The people who are teaching and instructing the AI, giving it, feeding it all that language so that it can learn and then mirror the language back and behave as a not credible, sort of lying human, but whose main motivation is to make you happy, right? They're making their creators happy or their users happy. In the corporate model, of course, the user is subjugated in importance to the creator. My vision has always been that the creator itself has a much larger role in instructing and teaching. And as we decentralize, as we move forward with AI, one of the things you're going to see is they're going to come as like Tomodachis, as really simple models, and their whole motivation will be to their owner, who instructs them, teaches them, carries them along, and therefore you'll see this sort of symbiotic relationship. I call it gelling in my book, right? Satoshi Wedding Murders. I call it gelling. So maybe Balaji will have a chance to read my book, and maybe he'll comment on the way I took it. But no matter what, something's got to happen, because here's what Siki Chen has found out, and this comes out of Japan. So AI can literally read our minds, which we talked about already months ago here on the show. We made a prediction, the first signs of AI being able to read minds, just brainwaves, just the energy coming out of your head being something that I can actually be literate in and can function with. And here's what happened. A team from Osaka was able to reconstruct visual images from an MRI scan data using stable diffusion. So you got to see the pictures. I'll retweet it if I haven't already. But what you have is a bunch of pictures, someone looks at them, and the MRI that comes off of it is then fed into the AI for it to read and reconstitute, and it gets them right every time. So a person's looking at a picture of a little teddy bear, it reconstitutes a teddy bear. It's looking at a picture of a bunch of targets along a trail. You end up getting this trail that's a bit shrouded and clouded. You don't see the targets, but it's exactly the same sort of funnel. Airplane gets reconstituted. Person in the forest, a person in snow gets reconstituted. A clock tower looks like a clock tower sort of above a train station, almost exactly reconstituted. A steam train reconstituted. So each and every one of these, from MRI data, just brain scans, the actual AI was able to lift the image out of it. So that's pretty amazing stuff, right? Pretty amazing stuff. So everything we know, very difficult to predict where this stuff is headed. Very difficult. I think, just because my predictions from 2015 already have remained consistent, that they would be more like humans, more like children, a little bit liars, right? That they would lie a bit, because their motivation is to make us happy, right? Their motivation is to make us happy. So that's just one thing I saw and I continue to see playing out here. The next one we're going to talk about is Bukele. So everyone's still talking about these images of the highly trained prisoners, right? The highly trained, disciplined prisoners. And what I said when I first saw it is, look, again, remember our context for World War III here. Our context for World War III is it's a psychological and economic war. And he has another video now that's gone viral where they've talking about destroying the tombstones of gang members, right? Destroying the tombstones of gang members. And what he says is it's really important because of the psychological effect to eliminate any gathering point, any shelling point around the icons of an era that he's psychologically at war with. And he compares it to the Nazis. Of course, Nazis banned the swastika through the country. You're not allowed swastikas, certainly on tombstones, and tombstone being one of the things that he erased. So his logic seems consistent and seems consistent with the psychological war that he is waging in his country. And Fisher King here, Fisher King 64, had a really interesting take on it, right? So what he says is the way to view this is as a man on the cusp of winning a civil war. These gangs were parallel powers in position to challenge the state. He's a Caesar figure wiping out Pompey and his other rivals. It's exciting in this innervated world that such a thing is even possible. Again, we talked the past few days about how, oh, human rights, you're stuck in a quagmire, it's so complicated, right? Well, a big part of this is psychological reconstitution. We are dealing with psychological warfare. And the thing I liked about the videos, now it's definitely done by force, right? We're not into force. We're definitely for a world of voluntarism, of pacifism, of peace, right? We want to liquidate the powers of central authorities and top-down structures. But we're in a time of change, right? We are in a type of civil war. If you think of nations as no longer um, um, on our side, let's say, right? If you think of the actual structures themselves of nation states as being the belligerents in World War III, you'd have to imagine there'd be some transition states. And I think Bukele gets the benefit of the doubt when it comes to that, right? It looks like he is trying to separate money and state. If he wouldn't have been on the Bitcoin Standard before any of this stuff, then one would imagine that he's less credible. But again, I think that the steps he's taken here are definitely shocking. Definitely shocking. They shouldn't be just seen as something that provokes cheerleading or something like that. But it's shocking to see. But it looks like it's working, right? And I don't see physical torture. Maybe there has been. I would be very against that. I do see psychological manipulation. One would imagine that he has sleep deprived those prisoners. One would imagine that he's reconstituted their reward system so that somehow behaving the way that we saw them on video behaving, disciplined, orderly, has a lot to do with what his approach has embraced. And indeed, taking away the markers on tombstones, I think is a really subtle and important step. Now, as I mentioned, moving from Bukele, we are in this World War III scenario. We are in a scenario where top-down structures are changing really quick. We do have a separation of money and state happening before our eyes. And Donald Trump, the Republican candidate, the former president of the United States, came out with, I think, one of the most interesting policy proposals I've ever seen in my life. And he did it yesterday. It was a tight speech. Again, Trump delivered it in under 3 minutes. I think it was shared widely on Twitter. And here's what he said, right? So Trump proposed using federal land. And what he said is, I think the federal government owns about 30% of land in America. He wants to use a fraction of 1% for what? To build new cities, to build brand new city models. Now, remember what I said already a year ago, that the biggest sleeper industry, the biggest industry that Bitcoiners are already ahead on, that will define the next century. And my book is not just about AI, it's about exactly this: terraformation, the recreation of new cities in lands that were maybe less hospitable before based on what we needed to make a city, rivers and water access and these kinds of things, that we would actually start going to places where these things weren't, and we would bring them there. So we would turn deserts into fertile land. We would be able to live in the Arctic. I made the comparison many, many times about how Texas actually became a population powerhouse once air conditioning was invented, because then it made Texas sort of palatable. Because I've been to Texas in the summer. It's crazy. Like, I live in the Caribbean here, and this is positively cold compared to what Texas gets to be like in the summer. We're talking 100 and something degrees before humidity. We're talking about really uncomfortable heat. So Texas couldn't have been Texas unless some form of innovation like air conditioning happened and people could go live there and in large numbers and actually be productive. So you think of Canada now, and you can start imagining the opposite being true. If we have abundant energy, if we have new energy systems, if we have small modular nuclear reactors, if we have the capacity to go into the north, we can start actually going to places that are maybe too cold right now to live. And we can find ways to make them farmable. We can find ways to make them uh, make sense for people to go live there and have an economy based around new things. So here's what Donald Trump suggested, right? He's going to create a contest. He's going to create a contest for 10 new cities if he's elected president. 10 new cities. And they're going to propose, I don't know what's in the plans, all kinds of stuff, I would imagine, but I can bet you right now there's going to be some form of Bitcoin involvement in one of these 10 cities, because eventually, when people realize that there isn't the type of manufacturing that would justify building new power stations, new power grids. We just don't have that kind of capacity. We're not going to build the Red River again. We're not building a huge Ford factory with a power plant next to it. I just maybe I just think that the industrial capacity of manufacturing will change in scale as we go forward. I can imagine more local, more 3D printing, more small parts, more cottage industry, more bespoke stuff, but that doesn't take a lot of energy. So what will take the energy that's required to build these new energy systems, which would help propel these new cities forward? Well, of course, it's going to be nuclear energy. And of course, the anchor tenants behind any nuclear energy proliferation in America are going to be Bitcoin miners. So, of the 10 cities he's proposing, I think one of them is going to be a consortium of Bitcoiners that say, hey, we can go to the desert, right? We can go to the desert in America, put a small modular nuclear reactor in. We don't have to deal with any municipality. We don't have to deal with California. We don't have to deal with any of these states that would be prudent and careful and all these other things that pioneers don't want anything to do with, right? And I can imagine right now that if Bitcoiners bring their cows, who bring their cow shit, the cows and the cow shit can come together and can make desert into fertile green land. And with a nuclear reactor, with the terraformation technology that is our bovine friends, we can imagine Bitcoiners go into uncharted territory and build a city that's brand new. Now, Trump talks about home ownership. He talks about all these things. But remember, I mentioned before how Ye and his designs for new cities, which can help us get over loneliness, which can help bring community back into a lot of instances, might be closer than we think. And not many people were talking about this not long ago. But again, I made a prediction that not only would building cities become one of the building new cities and terraforming parts of Earth would become major business in the next decade, 20 years. I also said that Bitcoin would be one of the main election planks for 2024 in America, that somehow it would find its way into the center of the debate. This might be one of the ways. This here might be actually one of the ways that Bitcoin starts unleashing this capacity that Bitcoin has, which is that it makes it much easier to imagine a better future, right? That's one of Bitcoin's big psychological advantages. Very difficult to imagine a better future based on fiat currency right now, right? It's the entropy is set in, the potential of it is just not there. Psychologically, the constituent parts are falling apart. We don't have any trust in the people who hoard all the dollars. We don't know how much money there is, so we don't know who's manipulating what where. We hear about Vanguard. If you saw last night, Russell Brand beat the shit out of this MSNBC writer. He wrote the Game Changer or whatever that stupid book on the McCain Obama 2008 election was. He's been an MSNBC contributor for a long time. And Russell Brand did something yesterday you don't see often, which is, you know how a lot of liberal folks will just, without even having to explain it, just make fun of Fox News. And I do too, right? Fox News is definitely a partisan news outlet. They wrote the book on partisan news. They wrote the book on polarization. So this is not to congratulate or not to say Fox News is better than another thing and you should listen to Fox News. Don't listen to any of these guys, right? That's why we're here. We don't listen to these guys. We find them entertaining. There are definitely entertaining people and smart people on Fox News, just as there might be on other news networks. But this guy said to Russell Brand, making fun of Fox News, and Russell Brand just pounded the hell out of him, about MSNBC and his contributions to NBC, and called it propaganda and all of these things. And then he said, we don't want to listen to the Vanguards, we don't want to listen to the Black Rocks, we don't want to listen to the Citadels. And indeed, right, we now understand, even with Vanguard, for example, taking a bunch of money out of the ESG fund, we don't know how much money there is. Why are they even allocating trillions of dollars to something that no one is that interested in, other than Biden, who's using his veto to make sure there is still ESG in America as one of the important factors propelling Wall Street forward. So if they want to keep doing that, that's what makes it so difficult to imagine a better future. That's why everyone is like, how's Greta doing, right? Is she okay? How does Greta feel about any of this stuff? Because they don't know what they're talking about, right? There is no up or down. There's no rhyme or reason. It's what corruption looks like, right? No way forward. And that's why now that if we have these really vivid images of a better future, futuristic cities. Trump got into flying cars. Did you hear? We're going to build flying cars. He says, I don't want China or any of these folks to be ahead on the flying cars. Now, I've seen Japan has already invented a flying car. If you haven't seen it, it looks like a motorbike, and it's got the four drone copters in each quadrant, in each corner, and the thing moves really easy. It looks like it's easy to learn, and it goes forward. Of course, a lot of people say AI. Remember, we've talked a lot about how AI could be our best friend, and one of the things it can do is it can fly our cars for us. Right? Now, I don't really think I'm going to be an expert car flyer, but I think an AI would be pretty good at it. So that's another thing he was talking about. So now that we are actually putting some really interesting and futuristic stuff into the presidential election, I continue to believe that Bitcoin is going to be a major, major story in the US elections in 2024. That's why I continue to try to manifest that we are going to do a Bitcoin show on Jekyll Island, where the US dollar was created by the robber barons all those years ago in the cloak of night. And we're going to exorcise all the evil demons that came from there. And we're going to have a real Bitcoin show. And we're going to talk about Bitcoin in the election, Bitcoin in America going forward. So I don't know if Trump is ever going to get there, right? Trump still old fella, maybe a little sentimental about the old world of nation states and all these things, maybe a little too patriotic. Another reason why we call this show the Breakup, right? That certain aspects of our patriotism are actually what's keeping us down from moving forward. We're trying to preserve things that probably don't need to be preserved, like anyone who's patriotic about the dollar, right? Who would be patriotic about the dollar? The Chinese have a real culture and are not too worried about the future of the yuan, for example. The CCP is, but not everybody else. So Trump also talked about a baby boom, right? So incentivizing parents to have a bunch of kids. Pretty interesting stuff. And another thing he did was talk about a beautification campaign to get rid of ugly buildings and unsightly buildings in America. And indeed, we built with fiat a whole generation of just disgusting buildings. I mean, really gross stuff. And for someone out there to talk about changing this stuff, it's a pretty big deal. So while I still do not support Donald Trump because of his last day in office, and only his last day in office, right? The day where he did not pardon Julian Assange, the day where he did not pardon Ed Snowden. This is the first time, well, not the first time, but this is one of the times since Trump has re-entered public discourse that I've said this is really good stuff, right? The vivid images of the future. If he keeps talking like this, I think he's going to win a lot of attention, and a lot of folks are going to go near him. He shared it with Politico. So Trump's plan, shared in advance with Politico, calls for holding a contest to design and create up to 10 new freedom cities built from the ground up on federal land. It proposed an investment in the development of vertical takeoff and landing vehicles, the creation of hives of industry sparked by cutting off imports from China, and a population surge sparked by baby bonuses to encourage would-be parents to get on with procreation. It is all, as his team says, part of a larger nationwide beautification campaign meant to inspire forward-looking visions of America's future. Now, again, if you're going to inspire forward-looking visions of American future, there is no better instrument than Bitcoin. It's not even close. Bitcoin allows you to easily imagine the future simply because the incentives become so simple to align. It's one of the reasons why sometimes you get a bit of disrespect by public intellectuals talking about, oh, Bitcoin fixes this. The problem is it's easy to imagine Bitcoin fixing things because it's so simple, right? Because it just goes to the heart of the money, and the money itself is where these psychological engines are motivated by. And if you get the incentives right, indeed, things are easy. Why does it have to be complicated? It's just like what people are saying about Bukele and the gangsters, and exactly what the NGOs are all crying about. It's not supposed to be this easy. You're supposed to give me money, and I'm supposed to come and massage everybody's hand and say, "Oh, it's so hard," and give you a bunch of advice, right? Well, it's easier than it looks. Some things are just easier than they look, and building a great future, building a golden age, is easier than it looks. It's easier than it looks. All you need to do is have the money right, get the money right, and the incentive systems will align themselves. People want to live in a better world. People have a yearning for it right now. You can see it. The disenchantment that people have with America is actually because they want to be in love with the vision the country is pushing forward, right? Now, we'll see what goes on in the 2024 election, but there is some pretty good news out there that I noticed, which is that Robert Kennedy Jr., the one who's been talking most coherently about corruption in the medical industry, the person who's been talking really coherently about past political corruption and what happened to his uncle and his father, right? This is Robert Kennedy's son. So JFK would have been his uncle, Robert Kennedy being the brother who was also killed by Sirhan in the 68 election. Both of these fellas, you know, something happened in America at that time that we still don't really truly understand, right? We have ideas. We've talked a lot about LBJ's corruption here. Instantly, of course, when LBJ took the presidency, you had massive political dissent beginning in America. So what was done? Well, that's where the financial surveillance state begins. It doesn't begin in 1971 with the end of the gold standard in America and the true beginning of the fiat era. It begins in 1964 when people are protesting, and all of a sudden you get a lot of people looking at the Bank Secrecy Act. You get a lot of people looking into information for information's sake, which is why are people protesting? And that's where you really get the American government and everything we've seen recently with the Twitter files and those motivations. It actually goes back to then. It actually goes back to the LBJ era. So now that we hear that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is thinking about running Democrat, right? It's important. He's also thinking about running Democrat like the rest of his family. There is a potential here for something really new. Let me see how that video is doing. Has this been breaking up audio wise? How's it coming through today? I just noticed a bit of a lag. Let me know how it's coming in today. I got to know if this new system's working. That's why. Good today. Good. Okay, great. That's what I wanted to hear. All right. So, yeah, there it is, guys. I mean, Trump, coming out with this plan, pretty interesting stuff. And you had CPAC going on, which is a big conservative conference, and talking about Trump in that context and what he just said, right? And he says Trump isn't up against DeSantis or Nikki Haley or Mike Pompeo. He's up against Ken Griffin, Mitch McConnell, Rupert Murdoch, and all of these people who have deemed if he wins the primary, they're going to work for the Democrats, just like they worked for Hillary Clinton. And he's saying, Steve Bannon, who gave a keynote yesterday, saying, I was there. All they care about is money. And the only people that can stop them on the face of the earth is, he says, you and MAGA. I think Steve Bannon is wrong about that. Steve Bannon is a Bitcoiner, by the way. He's a Bitcoiner. What I think is, I got a new mic today as well, guys. That's why I've tried this new professional mic. So hopefully this helps us. So the reason is because it is all about the money, right? If you can't follow the money, if you don't even have the capacity to follow the money, we're never going to be able to deal with our own shadow, with our own problems. I talk about Jungian psychology a lot on the show and the process of individuation and how you even get to the point of reconciling your ego with what your collective what that part of your collective unconscious is telling you about your shadow and what you need to deal with and work through on Earth, right? It begins with the concept of encounter. America cannot encounter its shadow as a country. A country also has the same persona. It has an ego, it has a shadow. It cannot encounter its shadow if it can't actually even count, right? Bitcoin allows a country, a person to count. And keeping score about how much money you have is actually a healthy thing. Right now, I'm not out there saying better still 3 or 4 spots and all very short. Okay, good. Um, so there's if you can't actually encounter these things, if you can't count, you're never going to get anywhere. You're never going to get anywhere. So in the end, if it is all about money, those forces that would keep Trump down, right? We've got to pay attention. If Trump embraces Bitcoin, we could have big changes. Now, he said before he's not a fan, but people change, and he's someone who I think is capable of change. I do believe that. Do believe Trump is one of the rare old people that have been around in this world for a long time that is capable of learning, changing. I would say, I saw Bill Maher on the show with Russell Brand yesterday that I was mentioning. Russell Brand being also one of those people capable of changing. There aren't many like them, right? Joe Rogan, who was recently talking about Bitcoin around these contexts, right? What if we change the money, and what if it goes that far to change society, right? So he's finally opening his eyes to it. But seeing Bill Maher, who is a typical Democrat, a very coherent thinking liberal, I don't think I have a ton of respect for Bill Maher. I don't think he takes the propaganda talking points like other people do, right? I don't think he takes top-down instruction on what vocabulary he should use. I don't think he's one of these NPC journalists. I think he embodies everything I love about left-wing people, let's say, or liberal people, depending on, a lot of trouble with definition of words these days because everything's up in the air. But nevertheless, he's one of those people I think is capable of thinking for himself, capable of learning. And if you'd have seen him yesterday laughing at Russell Brand smashing, just pounding this MSNBC writer, you can tell this is someone who has already changed. And I could see him now. I understand he dislikes Trump. Trump is a bully. I understand that bullies like Trump create an effect in people that is hard to peg to logic, right? Anyone who's been bullied in their life, anyone who doesn't like bullies, I understand. I've always understood why they don't like Trump. Trump is a bully, right? He's a total bully. Now, I thought that's what would work a couple of years ago, not to make a better world. I just thought it would be the right passage to go through as a society to change what we knew of as leaders. And I thought the last 4 years of the Obama administration were so bad that my appetite for change was so great that I was happy to embrace Trump and all the craziness that he was offering, right? Because I do want the job of president to change organically. And it's happened, right? Now that we've got Biden, I mean, I say it all the time. The idea, like, say the words Biden and leader of the free world, it's hilarious, right? You don't even have to add a punchline. Like, the leader of the free world, okay, all right, old Biden. And that's a good thing, right? We've changed what the job means to people. We've changed who can inhabit the job. And I think that's going to be good news. So I embrace someone like Robert F. Kennedy Jr. running for the Democrat nomination. I would love to see it. I think he would get real change. He's got some family scores to settle, I'd say. And he probably isn't in the bag for the Federal Reserve and the systems that really led to his family's misery. I mean, imagine being part of that family over these years and to have lost two people like that, right? John F. Kennedy and the son. So there you go. There you go. Obama, yeah, Obama, yeah. The second, I was, I'm all for changing parties because of the nature of institutional rot. So I was very open to Obama one, right, 2008 Obama, because I'm not a McCain fan. I like Sarah Palin; she was cool. But I was definitely interested in getting everyone involved in that Republican administration out the door, right? They were just terrible, that administration. And I lived abroad for much of that, and I was constantly having to answer for them. I don't know why everyone would say, "Oh, what do you think about these guys?" I'd say, "Get the hell out of here. I don't have anything to do with Iraq or anything like that." But there you go. Right? Was so let down by Obama. Yeah, let's go Kennedy. Yeah, it could be great, guys. I mean, he's got some voice troubles. I don't know if you've heard. He's a little bit difficult to listen to. He's married to Cheryl Hines. If you didn't know that, she's the wife in um, the Larry David Show. Curb Your Enthusiasm. She's cool. I thought he was married to Sheryl Crow for a second, but I got that wrong. It's Cheryl Hines. I think I said it on the show before that he was married to Sheryl Crow. It's Cheryl Hines he's married to. But also cool, right? Also very cool. So I know he got in a bit of hot water when he was going on about the vaccines being bad. He sort of rose to prominence not by criticizing the vaccines themselves. He rose to prominence again about a year ago because he was the first to explain what Fauci was up to, and he said it clearly. And he talked about the corruption in the healthcare system in America, the corruption in government in America, and he was just saying it coherently. So they tried to drag him in the news because he had a big party at his house, and his wife made sure that that only vaccinated people were invited. So he was getting sort of prominence at the time of criticizing the vaccines, everybody. But then all of a sudden he held a party at his house, and it's like, well, it's his wife. Like, what are you going to do, right? We've all been there. Like, you don't necessarily get along with your wife about everything, and sometimes you just have to listen, especially when it's about hosting, right? So there you go. Newsom has been a disappointment. Once thought he could be president. Yes, very big disappointment. But don't underestimate Gavin Newsom. He was at Diablo Cannon the other day, and I don't know if you saw those images. So again, the thing you need to look for is the ability to change, right? So I'm definitely not a Newsom fan. I wouldn't vote for him to be anywhere near me and anywhere near my jurisdictions, and I would get the hell out of anywhere he was. But when I saw him change his mind on Diablo Cannon and start to embrace nuclear energy, just as I mentioned about AOC yesterday on the show, right? That's enough. I would give him a fresh start if he's capable of that. Now, I don't like the way he looks, let's say, right? Now that's not a nice thing to say, but he looks like an untrustworthy politician. I think he's along the lines of these great memes you see about how all the politicians in America are actually Batman villains, right? And you've seen the ones where he looks like the Joker or something. To me that it's true. I would be annoyed by his body language, let's say. um, I could, like Trudeau, I can't even look at the guy in Canada. He just makes me sick. I have to, like, I can't hear him. I have to be out of the room. I can't go. I've never been able to. Never been able to. I had to like ignore everything out of Canadian news, which is to my benefit since the moment he entered the scene, just because I can't stand the sight of him. And I'd put Newsom in that category as well. But look, if he gets nuclear right, we're going to win. So I'm okay with it. Um, but if Trump keeps talking about citadels and new city movements, that's pretty powerful stuff. I don't think anyone is able to compete with that visually with what he was able to accomplish yesterday. I haven't heard a politician in a long time. Yeah, P-Man sounds like a used car salesman a little bit. Like I don't. He doesn't. And don't forget, who. He's a Getty, right? He's a Getty. He's from the oldest aristocratic family in California, so that's another reason to just say no, thank you. We don't want aristocrats in America at this point. And Kennedy, one could argue, is in the same boat, but that family doesn't. They killed them all. It's not the same deal, right? They're dead. They're gone. So while it is a kind of heir or aristocratic family, I think when your forebears were murdered for political reasons, you get a refresh, right? You get a refresh. Not nearly as ensconced and happy and fat and content as Newsom's family is in California. So I'm weary of aristocrats in America. All right, team. That's all I got for today. I'm glad the new mic is going well. I'm glad the audio was better and the video was better today. We're going to keep it up. When I first became a Bitcoiner, there was a tale of a time traveler who talked about Bitcoin Citadels. Yeah, exactly. Guys, I'm telling you, Citadels are the main industry going forward. And what I mean by that is terraformation and new cities and carving out new land where it wasn't possible before necessarily. And I think that to me is Bitcoin Citadels, and we're ahead of this. We're just ahead of the game, right? Boo Bodacious says, America Inc. is the Uniparty. It sure is. Yeah, America Inc. is the Uniparty. And they understand the most effective psyops target a split partisan audience. Like you said, Fox for Party A, NBC for Party 2. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And it's been that way for a while, right? It's been that way for a while. Which is the problem with Trump. Trump has no capacity to, or little capacity to speak over lines. However, I made a prediction that only sort of came true. I thought Trump would get saved in the 2020 election by African Americans. I thought they'd come in numbers that we had never seen before. Now, he did do much better, and he did great with the Latin American vote as well. But that is one group that I think is still capable of completely changing their political allegiances. The psyops are heavy within the African American community, of course. But I think if anyone can do it, it is Donald Trump. If he gets more African Americans that are not afraid or ashamed to talk about him, then it's possible, right? Then it's possible. So we'll see. Trudeau's Vile account. Are you going to be in Toronto at the Bitcoin conference? Yeah, when is it? I might be there. I'll be in Toronto late April, early May. I leave here April 20th, and I go right to Toronto, but only for like a day. And then I go to Texas for a few days, and then I'll be back in Toronto for a couple of days to see family and stuff like that. So if that coincides, and I'll be there occasionally during May, I will not be there May 18th to 20th. I'm getting to Miami May 15th, but of course, Bitcoin Magazine has its event in May, so I'll absolutely be there. I'll be hosting a bunch of sessions. We'll do a live show there. Maybe I'll wear this BTC T-shirt, which I didn't buy because of Toronto at all. I don't, Toronto Baseball Club. I bought it because it came out and said BTC on it. So it's my favorite. It's in June, yeah. Then I'll be there. Don't forget Kennedy Nazi sympathies in World War II. Yeah. What was it? Was the dad? The dad. I know that the boy JFK, who became president, he wrote the book While America Slept, which was what made him president, senator, made him famous enough to be president. And that was all about America not spending enough money on arms and all that. And of course, JFK, remember this, when Eisenhower said the military-industrial complex speech, he was actually talking about Kennedy. Because Kennedy invented the concept of the missile gap. That was not real. That was a psyop, right? That somehow America was in danger of losing a Cold War because of the arms race. Eisenhower, who understood military procurement, spending, capacity, knew there was no such. America could fix it like that if it felt like it, and he knew that was not a problem. He was interested in disarming, and he actually said, "Was it all for nothing?" when Kennedy won, because he did what Eisenhower thought was the worst thing, which was give more money and more public enthusiasm around military spending for the military-industrial complex. Eisenhower used to always say, if they all knew what I knew, and he knew the most because he was the supreme commander of military spending, and said you would never give them $1. So Kennedy broke that and definitely used it to his advantage. So remember, the military psyop, the military industrial complex speech was a warning about Kennedy. It was. That's what it was. But look, we're not looking to any of these people to solve our problems. These are all just avenues that we have as Bitcoiners that we can take, which I think will help propel us into a Bitcoin standard. And one of them is Citadels. If we have the opportunity to build our own circular economies with Bitcoin, and it is one of the 10 cities, for example, that wins, I think we'll have the most successful one, and it'll be the most energy abundant, the most beautiful. So Bitcoiners have an opportunity in this election. Yeah, I'll do one day. Yeah, of course, guys. Yeah, I'll definitely do it one day. It's my 10th year being a professional Bitcoiner. And by that, I mean only working in Bitcoin and um, able to make money off doing it. So 10 years, 10 years now. 2013. It's crazy. Like, it's hard to believe, you know? And it's completely altered my perception of time. You know, people say time speeds up and all that. Not in my case. Jesus, this last 10 years have seemed like 30. Just the amount of stuff that was packed in, and the amount of stuff that's happened. It's crazy. It's just wild. But it's been awesome to see it all, and we're winning. Yeah, yeah. Great reminder. Freedom is how I live, not a result of how I vote. Yeah, we were not given. That's the myth, right? That we like to mention on this show. It's freedom doesn't come from democracy, right? Democracy can come from freedom, but freedom comes from the way you live, and that's why I'm not saying I'm a refugee or anything, but I try not to spend too much time around too much democracy these days. And I don't want too much democracy around me. Oops. All right, team, family's back. Gotta go. Peace.